So this is a quick follow-up to the video I posted yesterday due to the fact that a lot of people had a lot of questions on the specifics of certain things. And I just wanted to go over a few of those things in this video. This is not going to be edited as well, that refined. This is more of just me going through a lot of the small specific things that I see a lot of questions on. So let's get into it and stay tuned to the end of the video for a few updates here and there. So starting on this side, we're going to start with the thing that I'm most proud of on this build, which is the shifter, which is this redesign. I actually made a copy. This is the original shifter body out of the Porsche Boxster, and it was a little bit wide for the car where it needed to fit and up against the seat. So what I did is I remade the entire structure out of aluminum and built it and put it all together and TIG welded it all together, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. O2 sensor controllers are on this side as well. They're the Innovate Motorsports LC2s, I think. And of course, fire extinguisher. All right, so pedals. You can't see them in here, so that's why this one's probably going to be mostly pictures. Essentially, when I first started doing this project, I was looking for a set of pedals, a set of floor mount pedals. And Willwood has a very nice set that uses their master cylinder and a few things like that for around $300. This is not that. I took that idea and said, oh, I can build that for $300, and then I couldn't. Essentially, I tried to reuse a lot of the Boxster components. However, that ended up not working as well as I originally thought, as in I bent the master cylinder and a few things like that. So going on from here, that brings us to the fuel tank. The main concern I had going in was finding a fuel pump that would work and in the space constraints provided. So I built this in-tank pump that takes a standard Summit Racing drop-in fuel pump, and it works very well, no complaints. The tank is baffled, however, it is not sealed. It doesn't have a bladder in it, so in the future I have a few ideas for that I'm going to be working through. The fuel injection timing and everything like that is covered in the MS3 Pro Evo. I purchased this through DIY Auto-Tune, no affiliation, I'm not sponsored or anything, but great guys over there. They were more than willing to help me out on getting this box picked up, and even some of the questions I had going through wiring and stuff, they worked with me a lot. It's a fantastic box to work with, and it was the one that was able to manage variable valve timing and a few things like that, so it made everything a lot easier. I also got a lot of people asking how I converted basically a McPherson strut system, which the factory Porsche Boxster had, and converting that over to a double A-arm kit like on everything else. So the lower A-arm is of my own control, and they have, of course, just the factory lower control arm mount that was not adjustable on the Porsche Boxster. The upper control arm was essentially all custom made, and this is a Moog ball joint, and I built an adapter to slide into there and clamp onto it like the factory McPherson strut would, but it just converts it directly into a double A-arm, and using the push rods coming off the lower control arm, it changed that dynamic a little bit. I'm still running a heme joint on the bottom side of this lower control arm, which I know is bad. I've been told it's bad a lot. And I'm going to eventually convert it over to a standard ball joint. In regards to the back of the motor here, there's a lot going on, to say the least. The alternator tensioner was something that I developed early on when I was first doing the design of this build because I wanted to clean the top of the motor up more than the factory tensioner. Factory tensioner has a housing unit that holds both the AC compressor and the power steering pump. I was deleting both of those, so I wanted to clean up that top plate and incorporate my oil filler neck, which became the PCV valve. The alternator tensioner actually works very well. However, I don't believe it's the strongest design, so I'm going to revisit that in the future. How I'm drawing vacuum to my air oil separator. The M96 is a entertaining motor in the fact that it really likes vacuum on the crankcase. Obviously, with the PCV valve and the myriad of problems that show up on this motor, it's not getting very good crankcase vacuum at the moment. But I attempted to replicate some sort of vacuum by using the vacuum coming off of my intakes and running them into a common manifold distributor, and then tying that both into my map sensor and into this catch can, which then goes into the air oil separator. What I'd like to do on this in the future is put a vacuum pump like the one used on the air injection system to reroute that to make it a little bit easier. The small radiator catch can up here is my pressure tank because there's a place where the radiator fluid flows into the heat exchanger for the oil and the coolant on the top of the M96 motors. I believe LN Engineering makes a plate that you can run a traditional air oil cooler and a water cooler, but for right now that functions very well and I have zero heating problems whatsoever. Oh, and throttle position sensors off of a Jeep Wrangler. The seat was also another early one on this that changed a lot. Originally I had just one of those plastic bucket seats that I ordered for very cheap, and I was going to try and use that for a while. That ended up not working for a myriad of reasons. This is actually similar to the one that Jim Clark's Lotus 49 actually had. I was having trouble finding dimensions on how these old cars work and who to turn to but the sim guys, the guys who actually do full cockpits for racing sims and stuff like that. They had a very nice diagram of how all that laid in there, and I was able to use that to replicate the seat. At least the driving angles that it was at. It's about 30 degrees off the back, and I believe it's 15 degrees kicked up in the front. So the gauge cluster was something I designed right before the steering wheel and everything went on. So for better or worse, I designed the gauge cluster around the steering wheel. And more specifically where the steering wheel mounted. It led to a few design faults, i.e. I can't see my furthest out gauges very easily, so it's something that I'm going to work through. From left to right we have main master switch, starter, fan control, dash lights, and a spare extra switch in case I want to add anything else. One of the big points of contention on this build was the stacked radiators. I knew a lot of people were a little bit questioning whether they were going to work or not, and I've had really good luck with them. There's a video by Linus Tech Tips that goes over, at least on the PC side, how stacking radiators affects cooling. And essentially, without getting too far into it, once the radiators are up to temperature, there's only a certain amount of heat that it can disperse, and you can mathematically calculate that out. However, that application, you're sealing off a lot of stuff and no outside air is getting in. This, especially in this configuration, I'm going to keep it in the future, allows external air to get in between the radiators, and I've had no cooling problems whatsoever. It stayed at 91 degrees fairly consistently, even on a dyno with no airflow over the back. Making the Boxster open air adds a significant amount of cooling effect as well. It's not buried under a bunch of insulation. The other thing added down here, or modified I should say, is the steering rack. It's a factory Porsche steering rack, however, it's been shortened, I believe, 7 inches, which sounds a lot more complicated than me doing. What I actually did was I just took a Sawzall and cut it 7 inches shorter for all intents and purposes. The tie rod ends are actually stock Porsche Boxster, but the tie rod mids, the inner tie rods are off of a Mercedes E-Class, which they worked out because they needed a shorter rack but a longer tie rod actual surface to keep the suspension geometry level. Hopefully that answered a few questions that you guys had. If you have any more, please drop them down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Like I said, this has been a big project, so there's a lot to cover, so I'm sure I missed something. From here on out, I have a few projects that I'd like to start and work on and film a little bit more, as well as I'm going to put the body on this and get it in tip-top shape and do a few more hot laps. So if you want, get subscribed for that. And please let me know what you guys would like to see more of on this channel. Do you want more builds, or do you have some other ideas on a direction you'd like to see me go? I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you.